The station's medical bay had never been designed for this. Dr. Ilara Wynne knelt on the cold metal floor, her jacket bundled beneath three small bodies that wheezed and trembled in the dim emergency lighting. The Crythian cubs, no larger than Earth housecats, had been pulled from the wreckage of a transport vessel that had collided with an asteroid field 6 hours ago. Their parents were gone. The rest of the crew was gone. Only these three remained, and barely so. Dr. Wynne, the station's AI, chimed with its characteristic lack of inflection. I must advise that Crythian physiology requires environmental conditions we cannot provide. Atmospheric composition, temperature regulation, and specialized nutrients are— I know what they require, Ilara interrupted, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she adjusted the makeshift incubator she'd constructed from salvaged heating elements and an oxygen tent. And I know we don't have it. The largest of the cubs had stopped breathing 20 minutes ago. She'd tried everything: stimulants, manual respiration, even a desperate shock from the defibrillator set to its lowest setting. Nothing. The middle cub's vitals were declining steadily, its chitinous chest plate barely rising, but the smallest one, Tyr, according to the translated manifest she'd pulled from the wreckage, still fought. Commander Vexthor had been blunt when he'd visited the medical bay an hour earlier. The Crythian diplomat had looked at his species young with eyes that held both sorrow and cold pragmatism. They will not survive the night, human. Their metabolisms are failing. Without proper hibernation chambers and nutrient solutions, the process is irreversible. I appreciate your efforts, but you should prepare for the inevitable. Ilara had nodded politely and waited for him to leave. Then she'd gotten back to work. The problem with most species in the galactic community, Ilara had learned during her 3 years on frontier stations, was that they were eminently reasonable. They calculated odds. They assessed resources. They made logical decisions based on available data. When the numbers said something was impossible, they accepted it and moved on. Humans, Ilara reflected as she mixed a solution of glucose and synthesized proteins, were spectacularly bad at accepting impossible. Tyr made a sound, a thin, whistling keen that cut through the sterile air. The cub's 6 legs twitched, its compound eyes flickering beneath translucent membranes. Ilara had read that Crythian young bonded through thermal signatures and vibration patterns. Without parents, they would become despondent and simply stop. Not tonight, Ilara murmured, pulling Tyr against her chest. Her body heat wasn't the same as a Crythian parent's, but it was warmth. You hear me? Not tonight. She'd been awake for 18 hours straight. Her eyes burned. Her back ached from hunching over the cubs. Station protocol said she should have logged off 6 hours ago. Should have handed this over to the night shift. But the night shift was one overworked. Centaurian nurse who was currently dealing with injuries from the same disaster that had orphaned these cubs. So Ilara stayed. She held Tyr close and felt the rapid flutter of the cub's dual hearts against her palm. Too fast. The metabolism was burning too hot, consuming resources the tiny body didn't have. Crythian cubs were supposed to hibernate after feeding, conserving energy. But Tyr couldn't hibernate. The stress response kept the little one locked in a state of panic. Okay, Ilara whispered, her mind racing through every xenobiology text she'd ever studied. Okay, think. What do human babies need when they can't sleep? She began to hum. It was an old song, something her grandmother had sung when Ilara was small and frightened of thunderstorms. The melody was simple, repetitive. She felt foolish for a moment. What did human lullabies mean to an alien species that communicated through pheromones and leg tapping? But Tyr's hearts began to slow. The vibration, Ilara realized. The cub could feel the vibration of her humming through her chest, through the points of contact where Tyr pressed against her. It wasn't exactly like Crythian communication, but it was rhythmic. It was steady. It was something. She kept humming and began to gently tap her finger against Tyr's carapace in a slow, measured pattern. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. Pause. Tyr's breathing deepened. The frantic flutter of those tiny hearts settled into something closer to normal. The cub's legs, which had been rigid with stress, began to relax. That's it, Ilara breathed. That's it, little one. She glanced at the middle cub. Its vitals were still declining, but slower now. She reached out with her free hand and pulled it closer, letting it rest against her other side. More warmth. More vibration. She hummed louder, tapped the pattern with both hands now, alternating between the two cubs. The station's AI spoke again. Dr. Wynn, your vital signs indicate extreme fatigue. I recommend mute notifications, Ilara said. She would not let them go. She would not accept the logical, reasonable conclusion. These cubs had survived the destruction of their ship, had clung to life through vacuum exposure and radiation and trauma that should have killed them instantly. They had fought this far. She would be damned if she let them stop now just because the odds were bad. Hours blurred together. She lost track of time. Her arms went numb from holding the cubs, but she didn't move them. She hummed until her throat was raw, tapped patterns until her fingers cramped. When the middle cub's vitals began to crash, she administered another dose of stimulant, off-label, untested on Crithian physiology, but it was all she had. The cubs' hearts restarted. Somewhere in the depth of the artificial night cycle, Tyr finally slipped into hibernation. The tiny body went still against Ilara's chest, but the vitals monitor showed stable readings. Deep sleep. Healing sleep. The middle cub followed an hour later. When Commander Vexthor returned at dawn, he found Dr. Ilara Wynn unconscious on the medical bay floor, curled around two sleeping Crithian cubs. The monitoring equipment showed readings he had not expected to see. Both cubs were stable. Both were alive. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, his mandibles clicking softly, a gesture of profound respect in Crithian culture. Then he retrieved a thermal blanket and carefully draped it over the human doctor and her charges. They said you wouldn't survive the night, he murmured to the cubs. They underestimated what a human considers acceptable odds. When Ilara woke 3 hours later, Tyr was watching her with bright, alert eyes. The smallest cub chirped, a sound of recognition, of bonding, and pressed closer to her warmth. She smiled, exhausted and victorious. Told you, she whispered. Not tonight.